All right. So welcome. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we are going to have a discussion about relationship and the culture surrounding relationship and sexual violence, and how we can work towards cultural change and the elimination of relationship and other forms of sexual violence. Relationship violence does not discriminate. It can happen to any person at any time. Therefore, it is really important to work with our community to spread awareness and understanding of the prevalence of intimate partner and relationship violence. As members of the campus community, when we become more aware of our campus and community culture, including who relationship violence affects the most and how to stop it, we will succeed in helping to create an environment where all students can safely pursue their education and work towards achieving their goals. My name is Shannon Ketchum. I am the manager of student programs at Spokane Community College. I oversee awareness and prevention education programming at SCC, and I'm also a certified Title IX investigator, which means that I receive and investigate complaints of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, gender-related violence, including stalking and intimate partner violence, and protected class discrimination and harassment and related retaliation. We want today's conversation to be a learning opportunity for the campus community and to remain respectful and support the spirit of prevention education and understanding available resources and services. As a disclaimer, we also recognize today's topics are sensitive, difficult, and may be triggering for survivors or victims of relationship and other forms of sexual violence. We'll provide during and towards the end of today's conversation additional information regarding campus and community resources for support and advocacy. So we'll begin today's session with introductions of our featured guests and some remarks from today's featured resource, Team Tina, regarding the background and mission of their organization. We'll then discuss a few questions surrounding the culture of relationship and sexual violence and how to work towards meaningful culture change surrounding the experiences of survivors, and also looking at the concepts of bystander intervention, recognizing signs of unhealthy relationships, and creating trauma-informed culture of support. We also would like to offer the opportunity for our featured resources to answer any questions from today's participants. If you have a question for our featured guests, please type into the chat or use the raise hand feature, and we'll work to address your questions as we move through today's discussion. So I'm now going to turn it over to Don Estes, our featured resource and featured guest from Team Tina, to provide a little bit of background and introduction for the Team Tina organization.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come on here today and speak to the students and to whoever else tunes into this, because domestic violence is really, well, I was just reading something on here, and it's amazing to see that most crimes committed are domestic violence calls to 911. They're now just caught me off guard there for a second. The reason I founded Team Tina Stewart Foundation is my niece, Tina Stewart, was murdered in Spokane, Washington on Thanksgiving 2017. Tina was beat to death by Nicholas Holden, 29-year-old man. He didn't just beat her to death. He pretty much destroyed her body, so we had to have a closed casket. He stomped her to the floor. He kicked her teeth out. He just pretty much destroyed every part of her and broke so many bones. The coroner couldn't determine the cause of death. Domestic violence is something that I am passionate to bring awareness to, and I will. So many victims out there are going through the same thing that Tina went through, and people don't know about it. Uh-oh, did I lose you? And people don't realize it. You know, domestic violence starts with simple, could be verbal abuse, but then it can go on and to be a physical abuse. Did I lose you, Shannon? Because I don't see, I hope I'm, there you are. Sorry. I don't, you know, in Tina's case, and I guess I'm going to go into this a little bit, you know, because I want people to understand this, you know. A lot of times, victims of domestic violence they get in these situations and they don't even realize they're a victim. And then they think when it starts and the verbal abuse and everything else starts, and then the physical abuse. In Tina's case, it was on Halloween the year before she was murdered, 2016, and Nick headbutted her in the nose and gave her a bloody nose. Well, she left him. But then what happens is a narcissist can play family members and their own families and stuff. And what they do is they convince the victim to take them back. In Tina's case, and I'm telling you guys this for a reason, be cautious, be aware, because in Tina's case, she took him back. She gave him that second opportunity. And now we're having this conversation. 6 months later, he took her life. And he didn't just take her life, he violently took her life. Nobody knows why. We still don't know why. As a family, we're talking almost 3 years. We don't have answers why he did this. All we know is it happened. And it happens all the time. I was just reading this thing right here, and I want you students to understand something. Every year, 12,000 women lose their lives to domestic violence. Now, we're not talking about men and children that are also victims of domestic violence. We're not talking about them. We're talking about 12,000 women lose their lives in the United States every year. We have a problem with domestic violence, and we need to bring awareness to it. We need to open up this conversation. And Shannon, if I'm going too far, you tell me you want to get in. But let me explain to you. When we have this kind of stuff going on, we've got to address it. We've got to address it where it needs to be addressed. And seriously, my opinion, in the schools. The schools, we need to educate our children, because statistics shows that if a child grows up in a domestic violence household, they will grow up to be a perpetrator of domestic violence. And that's a pretty alarming thing to see, because when you have 10 million complaints to law enforcement any given year to domestic violence, and 10 million calls going into hotlines, and they refer them to the law enforcement. Oh my God, I knew this was going to happen. And sorry about that. Should try to turn my phone off on. But with that being said, if we can start educating our children in a young age about healthy relationships, and I think that's what this is about, and explaining to them what's healthy and what's not healthy, maybe we can break this cycle. Because like I was trying to tell you earlier, when Tina was murdered, it was on average, 3 people lost their lives to domestic violence on any given day. 3 women lost their lives. Now, with statistics the way they are right now, and I'm just getting some more statistics, we're averaging around 7. And that's just on average. That's not because of the coronavirus pandemic, because there's a lot more right now. And when it all comes out, I'm sure when the next year, because of the pandemic and people being isolated and more people are stressed out and everything, I know these numbers are up. I've contacted the CDC. Calls are up over 25%. That means that's 10 or 12,500,000 phone calls. That's 2.5 million more calls to domestic violence. Law enforcement is telling, and I want to say this because it irritates me, but also it's sad. When you have law enforcement going on national television and telling victims to suck it up and deal with their perpetrators because they won't respond, that's heartbreaking in itself. And this was in Salt Lake City, Utah. The sheriff in Salt Lake City came on the national news and did that. I'm pretty sure. I shouldn't say that. I'll recant that because I can't swear it was him, but I do believe it was in Utah. So, when they're doing that, it doesn't give victims, any support. And shelters are being closed because of domestic violence. Look, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the signs maybe you can notice with your friends or something. Growing up as you did, and Shannon, and you had friends, you're a certain way, your personality is a certain way, you're real outgoing, bubbly, all of a sudden you come to a gathering with a bunch of friends, right? And say you are there, and I'm just giving you as an example, and here all of a sudden now you're shy. You're staying away from your friends. You're not having that normal conversation. You're not being your bubbly old self. Why? Obviously, there's a reason why. And those are some telltale signs you can look at and people can see and understand, hey, what's going on? And if you go up and approach them, let them know, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? Even that little simple conversation can help. See, with what I'm doing with the Tina Stewart Foundation, I tell victims and survivors, victims that are living in that relationship, when they reach out to me, my first thing I tell them, read Tina's story. And if you victims and you people out there, and you college students and anybody that sees this, Google it, Tina Stewart, Thanksgiving Day murder. When you read that story, if you're a victim and you're in an abusive relationship, get out. You need to get out, because it's not going to get better. People think, survivors and victims, and most of them, you ask them, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll say, well, I thought I could save him. Just like Tina thought she could save Nick. And I'm sure you felt that way probably. It's heartbreaking. Yeah, you did once love them, but they never did love you. And it can start in the school grade ages. Say you're going on a date with your boyfriend, and my representative out here, he happens to be a sheriff too, and he's a father and stuff. And he says, when you first sign, he goes, if you go out on a date with a boy and he tells you, he doesn't open the door for you, treats you with any respect, or laughs about you in front of your friends, more than likely, he's going to be abusive later on. And that's a good point. It's very possible. I mean, that's how domestic violence, it starts, like I said, at a young age. And if they're belittling you and bringing you down and isolating you from your friends, that's a sign of domestic violence, people. That's a sign that they're a narcissist. They're going to be an abusive person, because nobody has a right to control somebody. You all have a mind. You all have your own body. Nobody has a right to assault your body. Nobody has a right to belittle you. Nobody has a right to take your finances away or to isolate you, because once they do that, they're controlling you. And once they control you, they have you where they want you. And that's a sad thing, and it happens way too often. These statistics that I give you guys and tell people about, these are probably just low numbers. You know that as well as I do. People don't report all the time. This is what they say that does happen, that they do get reports on. But I can guarantee you these numbers are way, way higher than this, because not every victim calls 911. Not every victim reaches out and calls the hotlines. Not every victim's going to tell a friend or is going to report it. Do you know, another thing, is the victim is not usually the person that calls 911. I don't know if people are aware of that, but over 70% of the time, it's usually a third-party person that calls police and reports it. It's a child, a child in the household, or it's a neighbor, or it's a friend that reports it. It's not the victims. Victims don't report it because they're afraid for repercussions. And that is another whole issue. And it's sad. But they have a right to be concerned. And they do. Because some more statistics. We all know what a protection order is, right? You get this little piece of paper says, oh, you're safe. Your perpetrator's not going to come around and do anything. Yeah, really? Right here, I was just reading something on here, and I can't, it's like 500 times you're going to be murdered in a domestic violence relationship when you have a protection order and you turn the victim in, a protection order and you're trying to leave the victim. 500 more percent you're going to be killed in that relationship. Another thing, if they ever put their hands around your neck, you are, I think it's 92% of victims will be murdered if their perpetrator ever puts their hands around their neck. And these are numbers that are true, and guns are used in domestic violence cases at such an alarming rate. So we've got gun control issues and stuff, but we got to get the guns out. There is so much domestic violence that people don't understand. Doesn't necessarily just mean it's physical. Domestic violence isn't always physical. It's verbal abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, isolation abuse. I mean, the list goes on. And these students, you students out there that are going to see this, you think them hard and you look at your relationships. Seriously, look at your relationships. Because if you notice that these things are going on, you might want to rethink that and don't, because it's not normal. It's not, every relationship. Shelley Short, your guys' senator up in Spokane. I don't know if you know who she is. Shelley Short spoke at one of not my domestic violence rally, but a friend of ours I spoke at, and I had Brad Clifford, our state representative from Tri-Cities. He drove up to Spokane, and we had a rally up there. And Shelley Short came down, and she spoke at the rally. And like she said, you know what? She goes, it's healthy to argue with your spouse or your significant other. Argument is not calling each other names and belittling each other. It's an argument. You might have an argument over what you had for dinner, or maybe your dinner wasn't hot. Something. I don't know. Just saying something stupid. But it's just an argument. Well, you shouldn't do. Or maybe you did something. I don't know. But it doesn't get physical. It doesn't get angry and mean and nasty and stuff. Because she says, I'm a Washington State senator. Me and my husband, we argue all the time. It's just normal. That's healthy. That can be a healthy relationship. You got to have a give and take. But you also got to understand when it starts getting to the point where they're calling you, well, I'm not going to get into names, but you can all understand what I'm getting at. When they start using that kind of language to you and calling you that kind of names, now you're being abused. Now you're being abused. And you need to think about this because it'll escalate. You start off, it may be a verbal abuse relationship, but if it's verbal, it's going to get physical. And later on, it will get physical. And once it gets physical, and just like in Tina's case, sometimes something snaps in their heads and they just don't know what happens. They, in Tina's case, took her life. And it's heartbreaking. And I know what I'm doing, and I guess I can talk about that right now. I'll just quit. What I decided to do, when Tina got murdered, it was devastating. It was, and it still is to this day. I mean, it's almost 3 years. We're coming up on 3 years, and it's still to us, a month away from 3 years. It's still just like it was yesterday. But when we finally got to see her in the casket after the coroner or the mortuary was able to put her back well enough for us to see her, because like I said, he destroyed her, kicked her teeth out, crushed her skull. I made a promise to her that I was going to do something to bring awareness to domestic violence, to stop all this freaking violence, to hold these perpetrators accountable. And I didn't know what it was going to be until I thought about, we have a sex offenders registry. Why don't we have one for child abuse and domestic violence and violent criminals? Why don't we have a registry like that? With modern technology today, everybody has one of these damn cell phones. All of us do. How awesome would it be to have that information at our fingertips? Say if you're in a restaurant or in a bar and you meet some guy and he's sitting there and named Joe Smith, and you say, okay, he's kind of cute. I really like the guy. Well, you can go in the bathroom and Google Joe Smith and look and see, oh crap, he's got 3 domestic violence charges against him. That's him. Step away. You don't need to go out with him. So I decided to do that. I decided to make a registry. And so we have a bill. It's called House Bill 1080. It's in Washington State legislation right now. Brad Clifford introduced it, and Shelley Short introduced one on the Senate side to just do that, to make a registry. And coronavirus came in, obviously, so we're on hold on that. But that's okay, because in doing my research, I found out that Washington State has a public disclosure law. So that gives me the right as a citizen in Washington to request all criminal background or all criminal convictions of domestic violence in all 39 counties. I literally have to email all 39 counties and call. I was on a conversation when we came on this morning, and you know what I go through. But you know, and they're all on board with it. And it's amazing. These prosecutors said, what a good idea this is. And I said, yeah. And we don't need the government to do this. It would be nice to have the government to do it so it's done at the bench. But that's what I decided to do. And I took it and I said, I'm going to create Tina Stewart Foundation. I'm going to get a nonprofit going. I'm going to hold these perpetrators accountable. I want Nicholas Holden's name out there. I want him to be on the top of the list, knowing what he did. He's never going to be able to walk the face of this earth again without somebody knowing. If they Googled Tina Stewart Foundation or Team Tina, teamtina.org, or just put in domestic violence and it'll put up Domestic Violence Registry, it'll pull it right up on your Google search. It's in there. And people can look, you know, and he will be known for the rest of his life to everybody if they just want to get on the web. And that's just not Nicholas Holden. That goes on for every single person that is doing this to these people. Because in Tina's case, he's going to do 11 years in prison for what he did to her. 11 years. He got 16 years. He'll be out in 11 and a half years for doing what he did, to destroying so many people's lives, to taking Tina's lives. Her children are never going to be the same. You know, she was raising 4 children at the time. You know, she had her 2 children, and they were averaging age from 7 to 11 at the time. Yeah, 11 at the time. And, you know, he ruined their lives. He ruined our lives. But he also gave me something to do that I can change lives and save lives. And, you know, I look at Tina's story. You know, I don't think you know this, Shannon, but I'll let you guys all know. Tina's story didn't just go viral in the United States. It didn't. We were on international news in the UK. We were in China news to be honest with you, it's kind of weird. China, Guam, you mentioned Guam. I think we were over there. There was a lot of news broadcast about it. We've done stories in the UK. We were published in a magazine in the UK for what we're doing on the Tina Stewart Foundation to create this registry. And, you know, people were starting to see it. And, you know, we're 3 years in, or 2 years in now, 2.5 years in, and we're going to get it done. We are. And hopefully, you know, we know one thing. I know one thing. I know because I get the text. I mean, I got over 1 million people on social media, you know, in domestic violence groups, and I've totaled those numbers out. I am involved with, that's a lot of victims. And these are the groups that I'm involved in. There's over 1 million of women and men out there that are victims. We have a men's website for male victims. And I noticed that's one of your questions. And well, I want to talk about that a little bit, about men. And, but, you know, if we can continue to bring awareness to this and get it out there, we can do something about it. And eventually, hopefully, we'll get these kids to educate. Now, you know, statistics says 1 in 7 men are victims of domestic violence. 1 in 7. But yet men will not talk about it. You know, men don't talk about domestic violence because they're so afraid it's going to take away from their manhood, their, you know, their strength, you know, who they are and stuff. And so they're afraid to put it out there. But they are victims, and they need to talk about it. That's why we started a men's group, Team Tina for men, because we want men to talk about it. They need to talk about it, because as soon as they talk about it, more men will talk about it. And they don't talk about it, just like victims don't talk about it. We talked about this earlier. You know, a survivor, you're not a survivor. You're not a survivor of domestic violence until you survive. You can't survive if you don't talk about it. You need to open up about it. And even if it's to a friend, you need to sit down and explain to them what you went through. Get it off your chest. Get it out, air it out, so you are not holding that inside of you anymore. Because when you do that, because of all the violence you went through and all the hell you went through. All you're doing is hurting yourself, because that's in your mind. You've never let it out. It's in your heart. You've never let it out. You've never allowed yourself to heal. You have to heal. You're never going to get over it. Shannon, you will never get over it. I mean, what you're doing and you're advocating for and what you do and stuff is amazing. That's how you're doing this. More people need to do that. More survivors, more victims need to do that, because you know what? You heal that way. And not only that, but you're helping so many other people. Maybe this is what I have to do to heal from what happened to Tina. I don't know. But I know that that's how you heal. If you keep that stuff bottled up, all it's going to do is fester. You're never going to have a healthy relationship again, because you're just not going to trust. You're not. And that's a big deal with people, and they don't understand that. And they talk to me. It's hard to get them to open up and share their stories. I tell people all the time, share your story. You'll never know who you will touch or who you will save. It's just like I was saying, Tina saved so many lives. I used to get text messages, I mean, even all hours of the night, to victims right after I did my first few live videos and shared Tina's story and stuff. And victims would call me, and one in particular was in Australia. And I'm going to tell this story because it was kind of, Australia, different time zone than us. My phone went off at 2:00 in the morning, and I pick it up, and I'm what the heck? And I'm reading the story. And there was a lady with 5 children, 5 little boys. Her husband went to work. She packed up her car and she drove 3,000 miles across Australia to get away from him. And she called me to tell me that she read Tina's story, and it touched her because she was living Tina's story. And she knew that if she didn't get out, she would be dead. So she drove. She took her boys and threw them in a car, clothes on their back, and she drove 3,000 miles across the country back to her family, because obviously he isolated her. And those stories give me the encouragement to keep moving forward. When I know that her story is not, I tell people this all the time. He may have taken her life. He may have taken her body off this earth. He will never take her legacy. He will never take her memory. She's going to live on forever. And I hope to God she lives on in the law books, sorry. It's hard sometimes when I'm getting into this, because it brings back so much. And so much of the crime, the night that it happened and stuff. I mean, you guys got to understand, my whole family was here in my house in Tri-Cities where I live, and she was in Spokane, and we got the phone call that, she was murdered and stuff, and to have to drive that 150 miles was pretty emotional. But anyways, I shouldn't try not to. Usually I don't get too emotional anymore, but sometimes I do. Anyways, so you just gotta be strong, and you gotta talk about it. And if we don't do that, it's not gonna end. I was reading something else here. Oh, where's it at? Also domestic violence and the economic, and I just want to bring that up a little bit. $67 billion. $67 billion is lost wages to the economic, to domestic violence in the United States of America. That's $67 billion a year, because a victim calls in sick because they can't go to work or whatever. And because of the abuse, they don't go to work. I can't remember, it was an astronomical amount of man hours, over 8 million man hours lost for work because of domestic violence in Washington, in the United States. I mean, you start looking at those, and domestic violence, and a lot of people think domestic violence is in the home crime. They think that all the time. No, it's not, people. Domestic violence used to be behind closed doors crime. Used to be. So often nowadays, I'm going to touch on some other things here, and it kind of makes sense, maybe won't. But domestic violence has moved to our streets. You know, it's no longer behind the closed doors. It's moved to the streets. It's in our workplaces. It's in our schools, our middle schools, our high schools and stuff. In some situations, I text you about this. And the reason I did is because it was a middle school kid. I think he was in the 5th grade. Beat the living, was arrested for domestic violence in the 5th grade. We're talking, what, 11 years old? Come on. You know, it's in our schools. That's why we got to educate our children about this stuff. Statistics says, like I said, if you grow up in a domestic violence household, you're more apt to go out and be a perpetrator of domestic violence. Your percentage rates is astronomical. So, we've got to do that. And that's my next goal after this, of getting this registry done, is I'm also going after the education board to get a curriculum in the schools. Give these kids a safe place to talk about what's going on behind closed doors in their households, because they don't have a place to talk about it. My grandkids, my niece and nephew, my great niece and nephew, Tina's kids, Rick and Addie and Shane, they knew she was being abused, but he would threaten them, and they will. Perpetrators threaten the kids, they will. And they'll also threaten your family. And they'll say, oh, I'll just go kill your family. They do that. They do, people. You got to understand that. It's their way of keeping control, is by threatening and doing that. But the reason I want to go to the education, I was glad to come on here and talk to SCC about this, because it's important that these people in the schools know that, you've got not just in the college, in the middle schools, grade schools, the high schools, because you and I were talking about this. The average age group for domestic violence is 15 to 44. 15 is I just printed this off of the CDC website just as before we got on here, and was going over some stuff because I wanted to get some updated information. 15 to 44. Now, the age group that most murders, the largest age group is between 17 and 28. Those are the most common, but from 15 to 44. Now, in some situations, I could tell you it gets up into the elder age. I mean, last year I did a story about a guy he was 86 and his wife was 87, and he killed her domestic violence because she wouldn't give him $1 to go get a cup of coffee. Those kinds of things. So there's domestic violence doesn't care about an age group. Domestic violence doesn't care what your sexual preference is. It affects the LGBTQ community. Domestic violence doesn't care how rich you are or how poor you are. Yes, is domestic violence more common in the poorer class? Yes. But domestic violence is also in the very wealthy class. And we probably don't hear about those as much because for obvious reasons, but I'm sure there's a lot more than what the CDC and what these domestic violence coalition groups put out. Financing has nothing to do with it. I mean, I know a girl in Utah. She was very wealthy. Her family, she had lived in a big mansion, and she's one of our supporters in Utah. And she was very wealthy. And he beat her right on the side of the road by passerbys or driving by, and he threw her out of the car and then came back and beat her right there on the side of the road. And people, so it doesn't really care about demographics. It's in every house, every demographic there is. Is it your ethnic background? No, doesn't care your ethnic background. You don't care if you're white, brown, red. It doesn't make a difference. Domestic violence, it affects us all, and it affects whole communities. You think if my neighbor got murdered, domestic violence, it's not going to affect my whole neighborhood? It's going to affect my whole neighborhood. It's going to affect the whole community. Look what Tina's story did. It affected all of Spokane. It affected the world, the whole community of the world, because of the violenceness of the crime. And that's what, I can't remember how many views we had on when we first shared our story, but it was crazy, and I couldn't believe it. I'm going, damn. And at first I thought, are they reading these stories because of the more morbidness of it, because of what happened to her, or they're reading it because they were concerned? And then thus, when I started the Team Tina, I mean, obviously, there was a lot more victims out there than I knew about. I mean, obviously, like I said, I have over 1 million people on social media right now, which is that's a lot, but it just goes to show you how many people are victims out there. And you brought a point, Shannon, and I want to ask you about this because I haven't looked into this. So I want to ask you a question. Um, you said that you do research about what goes on in the colleges. So what is it looking like in SCC or in the colleges about domestic violence, sexual abuse?
Oh, absolutely. So I had mentioned in my introduction, I'm a Title IX investigator, a civil rights investigator for the college. And I can say just in the 2019-2020 academic year, we had approximately 27 incidents reported that fell under the Title IX legislation. Now that's a range of anything from stalking to intimate partner violence, sexual assault, or sexual harassment. But certainly a very staggering number, and that's just of those incidents that were reported.
At your school?
Just at Spokane Community College in the academic year. And again, that's just of those reports that we received. And so that certainly is someone that, as part of my job responsibilities, as part of my work as an educator, that's a staggering number. One is too many.
One
and
is too many.
that is just of the reports that we received. So I certainly, I spoke to this a little bit yesterday. We did a session to talk a little bit about student rights and responsibilities and student conduct in Title IX as part of this week. And part of what I shared as well was, we're not just seeing this as a broader concept, a broader, larger impact in the community. We're seeing this in our own campus community. And it is our responsibility as a campus community to bring attention to it. It is our responsibility as civically minded and human-centered members of a campus community and of the larger community to bring attention to the fact that this is happening and to learn more about ways that we can prevent, we can educate, we can work towards creating, again, a systemic culture where this isn't happening. And we actually do have a guest that's joining us, so I'm going to go ahead and add her in. But I would love to hear from you, Dawn, just regarding some of the questions that we had started talking about a little bit earlier. So given that, and given your question about the impact in our campus community, what would you say we can do as a campus community to educate around a culture of healthy relationships, as well as appropriate and safe bystander intervention?
We have to, okay, we touched a little bit about that on healthy relationships. Healthy relationships is something, it's a give and take. If you don't have trust in a relationship, let's start with that. Trust is a big deal. If you don't have trust in your partner, you don't have a relationship. You do not have a relationship, okay? And you got to respect one another. If you have no respect for one another, you don't have a relationship. You can't love somebody and say you love somebody when you don't respect them or you don't trust them. You can't. You have to be able to do that. And unfortunately, people just have lost that. They don't trust each other. I mean, I don't care if my wife wants to go down to the bar and have a drink by herself, go, I know she's coming home. I trust her. I trust her to do whatever she wants. You have to have that trust relationship. You have to respect one another before you can have love. And unfortunately, people misconstrued what love is, or whatever, they do. They don't understand it. And it's sad. And as far as getting, you said the bystander getting involved, be cautious on that. I'm going to say that right now. And I'm not trying to be tell people don't do it, but I'm trying to tell you, be cautious. because a lot of times, and I'm not, this is, I can go back and look in my files and pull up file after file of bystanders that have got involved and have ended up being murdered by the perpetrator. So be cautious. Know your surroundings. If you're with a group of people and you want to get involved, hey, get involved. But don't get involved if you're one-on-one and you don't know, the guy may have a knife or the girl may have a knife. You just don't know. And so you got to be cautious on that. Best way you could probably get involved, I mean, unless it's physical altercation, and it's physical and there is a few, you can stop it. But if there's not, get on the phone, call 911, hope we get somebody there to help them as quickly as possible. They're there to handle it. Because we don't want anybody getting hurt out there. I don't anyways. I don't want people thinking, oh, it'll be a John Wayne and jump in there and all of a sudden, now they're deceased also, because, and so is the victim, and that happens a lot. I want people to understand that. Be cautious. What was the other one you wanted to ask me about? I'm sorry. You got so many of them here.
That's okay. So just understanding how we can work to create, and I think you spoke to this, creating that culture of healthy relationships, as well as that appropriate and safe bystander intervention. So I certainly think you spoke to that. I think the next question I have for you is, we know that there are a range of negative issues and trauma responses that a victim or survivor of domestic violence or any other form of relationship violence may be struggling with following an assault or a pattern of relationship violence. What can we do as a campus community or as individuals to support survivors and victims in the immediate aftermath, as well as on a longer term basis?
What we did with the kids, and this is just what we did, but because they were such a young age, we had to get them into counseling for it. Because, as an adult, you can talk to somebody, you can talk to friends, you can talk, like I said, talking about what happened to you, that's a good way to get a start. You have to be able to discuss it. You have to let people know. And a lot of it's not easy. I mean, when you're sexually assaulted and violently assaulted, that's not something you want to talk about. That's not something you want to go share with somebody. But if you want to heal from it, you're going to eventually have to open up and talk about it, because otherwise you're not going to heal from it. As a campus society, you need to maybe get victims, survivors as yourself, and set up a support group, for victims, because you were a victim. You're a survivor now, and that's another thing that I try to tell. When the coalitions against domestic violence. And I'm just going to go off here for a second because I want to, and this is going to kind of tie in what I'm talking to you about right now. We're discussing about how you help and support. Do you know that in the YWCA, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I've done my research on this, do you know that I asked them a question? I said, how many people that actually work there at the Coalition Against Domestic Violence in the state of Washington, and we're going to just talk about state of Washington first, are victims or survivors of domestic violence? Well, none. I say, excuse me, what? What do you mean none? Oh, well, they go to school and get a degree. And they're counselors. They got degrees to be domestic violence advocates. Really? Well, to me, I see it this way. The best person that can educate a victim or teach a victim about domestic violence is a survivor that's gone through the hell, that's been through it, and they know what they had to do to survive it and get through it. They can tell a victim. You can go read a book. I could read a book tomorrow. I'm not book smart. I am far from book smart. I have a 10th grade education. I have a GED, but I did go back to college because I was a police officer and law enforcement degree. So just because you're book smart, you haven't lived it. You don't know what's up here in a victim's head. You don't know what they're going through just because you read it in a book. No. The best person to talk about is survivors like you. Survivors. I'm a survivor, but I'm a survivor because I have a victim, my niece, when she was murdered. So not just, we talked about this. I've buried 3 nieces to domestic violence. I ain't burying another one. Not unless we continue. I'll keep this conversation going for the rest of my life. And It's an important conversation. It has to be addressed. We talked about this earlier. Like, domestic violence getting worse and worse by the day, by the minute. Do you know, and I didn't tell you this, every 3 seconds in the United States of America, there is another victim of domestic violence. Every 3 seconds. That was before the pandemic. I can't imagine what it is now, but it was every 3 seconds. So I used to have the figures all up, I can tell you right off the top of my head what they were and stuff, but I have them wrote down in my file box, and I should have, because I would go by minute, and then I'd go by the end of the month, and how many victims, 200 and something thousand victims by the end of a month is how many victims are being beaten to domestic violence. So the people that I feel, and on college campuses, because I know you just said that you have 29, I think, cases, or 27 cases, you said, okay, those are the ones that have talked to you about it. Those are the ones that have come forward, okay, that you know about, okay? There's more than that. I can guarantee you that. You know it, I know it. Men are out there, they're not talking because they're, like I said, their ego, they're this, they're the strong man. They're not going to talk about it. They need to talk about it. But survivors and victims, if you're a survivor, get an advocacy group together. Set up a little deal where, I know you guys, I don't know, do you have one, SCC, or no? Do you guys have a kind of a support group for victims that go through this?
We do offer free mental health services on campus.
Yeah, it's not the same.
No, certainly. And
Yeah.
I certainly would agree with you that, the opportunity for fellowship, the opportunity for support is a critical factor for survivors of domestic violence. And so certainly, as we're continuing to build and continuing to develop a culture of being trauma informed and a culture of support and awareness and prevention education on campus, I think there are a lot of opportunities that we still need to explore, and a lot of opportunities we still need to talk about as a campus community. So
yeah, people often look at domestic violence as a physical altercation. Okay, man beats up on woman beats up on man. Domestic violence is so much more than that. It doesn't have to be physical, and people need to understand that, because like so many students are probably going to get on and watch this, and they're going to think, well, maybe I am a victim, because like I said, it doesn't have to be physical. It can be verbal, it can be financial, it can be isolation, it can be the trust issues, never letting you out of their sight, the belittling you. Those are all domestic violence situations. Okay, stalking, rape, sexual assault, those are all domestic violence. And if people don't realize that, and they think, oh, it's only because I got punched in the nose and I bled. No. Mental abuse, when you said you have the mental thing, that's a good thing. But most victims of domestic violence won't go to a mental health counselor. Okay, just letting you know, they won't. They would much rather go and sit down with you and talk to you, because you're a survivor. You know what they went through, and you feel their pain. I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope it makes sense to students out there, because you lived it. People that live this, they know. It's not, they don't believe that it's a mental health issue that they have, so they're not going to go to a mental health, and they're not going to go to a counselor. They're not going to go to their professor, because there's a lot of shame. I guess you could call it shame, that they feel guilty. And a perpetrator will make them feel like it's their fault. That. I mean, it happens in a narcissistic relationship. That's what they do. Sociopath narcissists, they put the blame onto you. Oh, you shouldn't have made me do that. Really? I shouldn't have made you punch me in the nose and break my nose? Really? Okay. That's a big, the perpetrator is blaming the victim, and it's so sad, and it happens all the time. And unfortunately, and it's sad, and I'm going to say this too, and you people out there, these perpetrators, they have a way of playing your family against you. they'll put the blame right on you, and they'll get your family on board with it, as they did with Tina, and they manipulated her, not my family, but his family, made her feel guilty. Oh, he changed. He went to counseling, did all this and did all that. You should take him back and give him one more chance, and hey, she gave him that one more chance. She won't give him another one because he took her life. Don't give him another chance. If you've been in a domestic violence relationship with your partner, do not ever go back. And I will say that till I'm blue in the face, till the day I die. Victims do not return to your perpetrator. They will kill you. And that is just straight, pretty much 500% of the time, that will happen. That will happen. It's high numbers. Let's just put it that way. You leave a relationship, don't look back. Don't go back to it. And too often victims do, and too often they're part of the statistics, just like Tina is now. And it's sad. And we had no idea as a family she was even being abused. I didn't even know about the incident that took place a year before when he headbutted her and gave her a bloody nose. They kept that from me. I didn't even know about it, but I wasn't that much into domestic violence issues at that time, because like I said, my other nieces were murdered in 2004. That's a lot of years ago. And then Tina in 2017, it just took a toll on me when that happened to her because of the violentness of it. And it didn't just happen in 5 minutes. The fight started at 9:00 at night. The coroner couldn't even determine the time of death because of all the damage to her. So he actually he knew it was on the 23rd, but they didn't want it, and it was stupid. County coroner office calls me and says, Don, we don't want to put her death on Thanksgiving because it'll affect your family on Thanksgiving for the rest of your life. Really, dude? What difference does it make if you put it on Friday the 24th? She was murdered on Thanksgiving. That's when she was murdered. Why would you want to move the date to the 24th? You know what? To make our family feel better? Really? It was still around Thanksgiving. We don't celebrate Thanksgiving anymore, not like we did. How can you, Well, let's go celebrate Thanksgiving. A lot of people pro and cons about that. I said, Don, you should celebrate, blah, blah, because, we still have our turkey dinner or whatever, little family get together, but not like it was. It's heartbreaking, but that's neither here nor there. But so many people are out there, and I know that a lot of your students in that school, they're going through domestic violence and they don't even realize it. That's what's heartbreaking. And they will continue that relationship because they have no idea. They haven't educated themselves. And I wish I knew. I think I went to the CDC website. Go, all you guys out there, seriously. And I want to talk to everybody. Shannon, you too. If you haven't had a chance to go Google this stuff, do it. Just go on there and look up domestic violence statistics. Look up and learn about it. Learn about what they really are. Because domestic, this is one I just printed out. What is domestic violence? You can print this out and it tells you, stalking, the sexual abuse, the assault, the physical abuse, the intimidation, the control, the power control, the financial abuse. These are just some of them right here. I'm just going through real quick. Power and control, isolation from your family members and your friends. Like I was saying earlier, you asked me, the telltale signs are sometimes like I've gone to the grocery store, and I've been going to the same grocery store for 15 years. Know the checkers all there, same grocery store. One day I'm in there, and one of the checkers that I've known for years, she's checking me out and doing her, tallying everything up. And I'm just looking at her, and she just wasn't herself. And I said to myself, what the heck is going on? She just wasn't chatty or normal self and stuff. So I kind of asked her, and she didn't want to say anything. But then I noticed her makeup, where she had a big old black eye where she tried to cover it up. And it was just, sometimes I guess I know because I'm so much into try to learn more and more. I didn't know about domestic violence. Like I said, 2.5 years ago, I wouldn't have known what I know today unless I did what I just told you to have your students do and everybody do. Research it, you guys. Find out and look and see if you're in that group, because a lot of times you don't even realize it, and you won't realize it until it's too late. And that's the sad thing. You know, you talk about the colleges. You said that there's 27 or 29, whatever it was, in your college. I know there's more than that. Do you know? And I'm talking to your students too. 1 in 7 high school girls. 1 in 7 high school girls. In the 4 years that they're in high school, they report that they're a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault before they graduate high school. 1 in 7. 1 in 14. That's, half of the girls, but 1 in 14 high school boys. So you men out there, you think you're not victims, you probably are. You just don't realize, or you just don't want to talk about it. 1 in 14 high school boys report the same thing, that they are a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence before they graduate high school. Those numbers need to come down. And that's why it's important to get this into the schools. I mean, if we can, like I said, I'm trying to go to the education board to get a curriculum together where we can have law enforcement or counseling or advocates, on standby at the schools. And, if we don't get a handle on this right now, it's only going to get worse. I mean, think about it, I wouldn't be here if it didn't affect my family, but it did. And I took a stance, and I'm going to continue this stance, because to me, I find it very, very much needed, to hold these perpetrators accountable. And what I've been doing, and I don't know if I've talked about it yet, I've created in Washington State, where we live, you guys, in Spokane County. You can get on our, if you I'll mention that, Team Tina, or just Google it about the registry. And we're compiling a list of offenders in the state of Washington, and we're going to put them on our website. And anybody that's been convicted, all the way down to a protection order. And I don't like doing the protection order one, but it's still domestic violence. They violated it. Obviously, they're stalking. If they violated protection order, they don't give a crap about what the law said. They just did it anyway. There's a reason why there was a protection order in place. So we didn't have that on. House Bill 1080 doesn't have the violation of protection order on there. But when I decided that because Washington State has this public disclosure law, that we can request that. And it doesn't just have to be about domestic violence. It can be about any crime. And you just ask the prosecutor, I want all convictions of domestic violence. They will give you a list of all the convictions of domestic violence. And that's what I've been doing, in compiling this list and putting it on my registry, on our registry, the Tina Stewart Registry. And so I don't know do you guys prosecute people there, Shannon, or do these people, or is this college done, or how do you guys do that when these complaints come in?
Sure. So it is not a legal proceeding. We do have a student conduct process that's based around our Washington Administrative Code, which outlines our full student standards of conduct. And so it is considered as a student conduct process, a student conduct investigation, and a civil rights investigation through the college. So while it has no legal standing, it is separate from a court-based process. Certainly when we receive those reports, we do investigate, especially if it's involving a student and another student. If it's involving a student and a non-student, we certainly make sure to support and advocate for connecting that survivor with resources and support to make sure that they're getting the help that they need in moving through and moving forward. And so, yes, we do have a student conduct process that addresses it on the college level. And we certainly have them with information on the resources on the community level as well. A couple things I added into the group chat that we'll be able to share out with our students from this recording. We did include the link for Team Tina, since you had mentioned that you're including the registry on the website. I also included a couple of PDF documents, which is our getting help document, our panel card as someone that may have experienced domestic violence, intimate partner violence, or any other form of relationship violence, as well as helping someone. So if someone discloses to you whether that's a friend, a classmate, if you're a faculty or staff, a student. It's a great resource to understand some tips on how to approach that conversation. And it's always to start by believing. Always to start by believing. And I think that is the critical message. I will say that until I'm blue in the face, until I'm as blue as my background. Because I think that that's a critical factor in making sure that those that choose to come forward and those that do choose to report or disclose know that they have support, know that they have advocacy to an agency to choose whatever those next steps are in moving forward and moving through that situation. So.
Well, in Spokane, we had and I'm not even, because you are in Spokane, so I'll talk, and mention some things in Spokane that are good for people to reach out if you're a victim or whatever. The YWCA is awesome. I've spoke at a couple of their deals up there. They are really good at helping victims of domestic violence up there. The reason I was curious on your college thing is Lauren McCluskey. I mean, I'm sure we all remember that. And if you don't, the WSU student, was murdered down there. I've been in contact with her family several times, but anyways, it's important that we acknowledge that people, sometimes these campuses, they sweep this stuff under the rug and they don't want it out. They don't want people to, for some reason, they don't get it to the police departments, or the police departments, people seem to think that this domestic violence isn't just in the homes anymore. It's like I was telling you earlier about back in 2 years ago, well, a year and a half ago now, I do believe it was March of 2019. A girl in Mississippi, she's 17 years old. Her boyfriend was 15 years old. They broke up. Well, he went home and got a gun. He came back and shot her and killed her. So this old farce about domestic violence between a partner and a spouse and another spouse, or domesticated partnership or whatever. You know what? It's not, though. I want to bring this up. All these mass shootings that we've had in the United States over the past few years. And I'm going to bring this up to you because I want to just touch base on this. Do you know that all these mass shootings, and this is proven fact, 95% of all them people that went out and did this, first off, they're not Caucasian. They're most of them are white people. I'm just going to throw that out there. But anyways, they all had domestic violence in their background, in their past. Every single one of them. They either grew up in a domestic violence home or they had domestic violence cases on themselves. 95% of these mass shootings, they go out and do this. Okay. So again, key thing here is, I can put a registry together. I can add 1 million names to this registry, and I can. And I know that, and I know this is going to happen. I'll probably have to leave social media, because once this gets going, I mean, look, I'm the guy that's doing it. Look at me, there's gonna be a lot of animosity from a lot of people because their name's gonna be on it. Personally, I don't care, but for the safety of my family, I have to rethink what I'm gonna do to protect my family when stuff happens, because I've already started adding names. I've got names coming in 2 years. I mean, I can't remember how many there was. 2,900 just here in Benton County last year. So there's 2,900 people where I live at right now. I'm not going to mention Spokane because they're off the Richter scale as far as domestic violence. Like I told you earlier, I got 2 inches of papers of convictions up there, and they're already on the registry, so they're on the website. But and that's just up until January of 2019 or 20. I haven't got the updated list yet, so that's surely going to grow. But if we can reverse this cycle, and like I said, education, I believe that. I believe that the domestic violence isn't something that somebody, I got up today and I'm 62 years old. I got up today and I want to be a perpetrator and beat the hell out of my wife. It doesn't just happen like that. It's a learned trade. It's something they've seen, something they've done, they got away with. Yeah, in certain cases, yeah, maybe, maybe they are, they become a narcissistic behavior and stuff. But most of it, and even in statistics, it shows that if you're in a home where there's violence, you're going to be a perpetrator yourself. So now we've got these kids that are growing up in these households with domestic violence. They go to school. They're being threatened. If they say anything, they're going to get crap kicked at them or whatever, or worse, or they're going to kill, whatever the perpetrator tells them, which they do a lot. And that's what was told to my grandkids and my niece and nephew. So I know that now. I didn't know that then, but so these kids don't really feel safe or able to talk about it. So if we give them the resources in the schools to talk about it, and then we get to the family problem, to the root of the problem, and maybe once the children are letting them know, get the resources to go out to the family. I'm not saying every family, it may not be physical at that point. It may just be a verbal abuse or something at that point. Maybe I'm not saying we have to break up families or anything, but we got to give them more resources and educate the families on how to make healthy relationships. There's a lot of stress in our lives right now. My God, with the coronavirus, I got underlying health conditions. I got 60% of my lungs. If I get the stuff, I'm probably not going to live. It bothers the crap out of me, and it's scary, and it's a lot of, it builds up a lot of stress and stuff. And I imagine everything does with everybody out there right now. So we know domestic violence is on the rise. But if we can give them the resources and the help to understand and work through it as a family unit, then that's a step forward. By letting it go and saying, oh, it's between a man and a woman. No, it's not. It's not, because now we got our kids going into the schools and killing other kids because of it. That's not a spouse killing a spouse. That's a child killing another child. Because why? Because they were able to get daddy's gun or mommy's gun and take it to school because they're mad at their girlfriend and shoot them, or her boyfriend and shoot them. And a girl just did that. She shot her boyfriend. This is not a one-sided street, people. And I want everybody to understand that. Understand this. Men are victims too. And people need to understand that, because so often we talk about women being murdered. In all the statistics, they talk about women. They don't talk about the men. This one, the one I did a minute ago, did talk about them a little bit about the men. 1/3 of women in their lifetime will say that they're a victim of domestic violence. 25% men are victims of domestic violence in their lifetime. That's the only statistic. But when you see the homicide reports, it only talks about the women being murdered. And women are more apt to be murdered domestic violence. That's a given. I'm not saying they're not, but they forget about the children that are affected. And not only that, but when say a woman murders her husband, okay? Woman's going to prison. They got 5 kids. Where's those kids going to go? They're going to go into the system. So, that impacts the communities too. This has got to be a community effort. It really does. We've got to open our eyes and open our ears and and realize that it could be my neighbor down the road. Shoot, one, and it's kind of ironic because who I am here, right? In last year, in less than a week, 3 of my neighbors were arrested for domestic violence assault. 3 of my neighbors within 2 blocks of me. I'm going, are you kidding me? They all know about who I am and what I do, and it's like, I couldn't believe it. There was that much in my neighborhood, so you never know. They say, statistics says 1 in 3 households. 1 in 3 households is affected by domestic violence, directly affected. So you get out there, you go on your street and you look down the street and you think about how many of those houses, what's going on behind closed doors. It's just it's staggering numbers. And like I said, and these are only numbers that they know about, that they actually get calls about, that are actually reported. You talk about 10 million cases a year, really? That's just the reported ones. And like you said, the campus, sometimes you guys, same thing up there at WSU, they didn't prosecute, or they didn't do, well, they screwed up a lot up there at WSU, and I'm not even going to get into that. But anyways, there's so much going on with that one. But yeah, we've got to keep these, we got to hold them accountable, and we've got to address these issues. And the sooner we do that, we can reverse this cycle. It's only going to get worse, and we can reverse it, and too often people, like I said before, earlier, it doesn't affect me. I was one of those. It didn't affect me. Well, it did affect me now. and it affects me deeply. And I try to tell people all the time, you may say that now. You may say, and people do, well, it didn't affect me. I've had people tell me that, I've never been involved in domestic violence. No, but reach out to all your family members. I guarantee you there's one out there that's been affected by domestic violence. And people are, but again, people don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. It's because they're shamed. It's a shameful thing. And that's another thing the perpetrators do. They put the shame on you. See, here's how I look at with domestic violence and women and men. See, a woman, you guys can put the makeup all on and all that stuff and cover it all up and hide it real well. A man can't do that, but a man is their pride and their ego and their manlyhood and all this stuff. That's why they don't talk about it. Women just cover it up and just go on and not talk about it. And it happens so often, like I was telling you about the checker with the black eye, come on, I knew, I seen it, and I could tell just by going through her check stand from knowing her for 12 years, 13 years, that, something was off that day with her. And then I seen the black eye and I knew what it was. But, and it's hard how do you approach somebody like that? If she was a person, if she was out of the store, I would have approached her. I have approached women that have been abused. I could tell that they've been abused, or, I approach them and tell them, hey, you know what? This is who I am. I have a business card. If you need anything, reach out to me. We'll be a support group for you. Join us on Team Tina. I mean, most of the people out there in the Team Tina groups, they're all victims or survivors. So if you guys want to join it. We have one for every state, not just Washington State. We have it we actually have Team Tina Australia. We have Team Tina Africa. We have Team Tina across the country, the world. I mean, it's everywhere now, Canada and stuff. But we want this to grow. We've been on national news because of it, and it's not personally, I want to step back away from it. Like I said, I'm 62 years old. I should be driving around, traveling the country, seeing the countryside, and and still doing the same thing I'm doing, but at least being able to go and talk at different venues and stuff. But I want more people to get involved, because if you don't get involved and we don't step up and do our part and say, hey, maybe this guy's right, we need to do this, because by getting involved and before you become a victim or before your friend becomes a victim, and start advocating to change these laws and get these laws on the books and get these resources going, get education in the school and do all this stuff. That's proactive work. Not like I'm doing. And I know people say I'm being proactive now, but I am being proactive now. But before Tina was murdered, I wasn't proactive. I wasn't, I didn't really care. Now, since Tina got murdered, it's a reactive state. So now I'm reacting to what happened to her. But it's not in a bad thing. I mean, I'm reacting, but I'm reacting in a positive way. I took something that was traumatic and devastating to my family. And I don't know, you can see her picture back there or not, but how good it's coming across. But that's Tina, that wasn't her in the casket, but that's another story. I have the only picture of her in the casket, and the only place that's going to be shared is on the Senate floor of the United States Congress floor. When I get there, and I will get there. I'm going to get there. That's my goal. That's my destiny. And that's Tina's destiny. We're going to have a national violent offenders registry. And if I have to do it state by state, doing what I'm doing, then that's what I'll do until the government gets involved. The way you students can get involved, you want to get involved, you can print these out. This is printed out. And I know it's election year, so next year this list is going to change. These are United States Congressmen's phone numbers. This is every single United States Congressman, every United States Senator in all 50 states. I can't tell you how many times that I have picked up this little gadget, even been on the news from it, been doing it, made phone calls. I have made, personally, myself, in 2.5 years, I've probably made over 10,000 phone calls. I couldn't tell you the emails that I've sent to these people that personally, some of them are probably perpetrators, and that's probably why they don't want to do this. And it's unfortunate. I know some of them are, because some of them were ousted out of office because of it, being perpetrators of domestic violence. But we're putting electing these people to office. And we got to be cautious about that because, they're hiding this stuff and then it comes out later on. Why? Because if I committed domestic violence right here in Washington state, right? And this is just hypothetically, if I did here in Washington, okay, I could go to Oregon or to Idaho and they have no idea that I had a conviction of domestic violence in Washington. There's no tracking it unless people like me decide to step up and do something about it and create this registry. Now, if anybody leaves Washington, decides they're going to move to Florida and seek out their next victim, and the victim down there can look at Washington State's registry, they see, hey, well, this guy came from Washington. Hey, he's on the registry. He's a perpetrator. No brainer. Can't cross state lines. See, Nick Holden, he had 2 prior convictions for domestic violence. Nobody knew about it until the trial. And then it came out during the trial that he had 2 prior convictions. And we're going, well, whoa, this guy's supposed to be all. Nobody ever knew. And unfortunately, and his couple of people that he abused have since come forward. I wish they would have came forward during the trial. And they feel guilty about it now because they didn't come and testify and give their accounts of what he did to them. He would have got more time if they would have, and a couple of them, the girls, really feel bad. And I told them, don't feel bad. I guess some people were mad because they didn't come and speak, but to me, knowing how a survivor and a victim is and what's going through their head, I can understand why they didn't do it. Do I think they should have, or at least wrote a letter? Yes. But it was still fresh on what he did to Tina. I don't think that they were probably in shock that they weren't also murdered. And I look at their not coming and doing the testimony and stuff is fear. They were fearful because, now they knew what he was capable of, and it could have been them. And she reached out, one of them reached out to me, and she was really upset the fact that, he only got 16 years and she wished she would have done more. And I said, look, you know what? First off, he's getting jailhouse justice. That's one good thing. But he's going to be on a registry. You can't hold it against you because, I understand where you're coming from as a survivor and a victim, what he did to you in your mind. But I wish he would have got more time. But I understand. I understand why they don't. And I know a lot of people say, well, they should have. Yeah, well, they should have. And a lot of people did. And they were kind of upset about it. But you got to understand both aspects of it. And unless you're a survivor or a victim, you don't really understand what goes on in their heads. And, I personally, I have, like I said, thousands of them I talk to all the time, and I'm always sharing their stories and they're always talking to me. And I'm not educated about this. I'm self-educated. I did my research. And that's what you got to do. And if anybody wants to get involved in this, like I said, you guys can get involved. Your students can get involved. All you got to do is call your state representatives, call your federal representatives. Wait till after the election, the 23rd, you're going to know who the next ones are coming, or the 3rd, you're going to know who our next representatives are going to be. And pick up the phone and ask them, get more resources out there. When we were talking, Shannon, a little bit before we came on air, we've got shelters being closed across the United States of America during a pandemic where there's double the victims out there that have no place to go, and the shelters are closed, not because of the coronavirus, because of funding. Because of funding. We need to get funding and we need to get resources for not the men, the women, and the children of domestic violence. We need to make sure that they are taken care of mentally, physically, financially. In most cases, with women or men, some of them may have never worked a day in their life. You know what? They don't have an education because they've never been able to go out in the workforce. They've never been able to work because, they're isolation, and control matters. They don't want them to be financially able to leave or whatever. So they do that. So they take there's no way they can make money. We need to give them the resources for that. And, I've reached out to Amazon and Microsoft and Google and all of them, Apple. And I've asked them, I said, hey, you guys need, and as soon as we get this up and going, you know, and hopefully the foundation, you know, with everything set up and stuff, that I'm sending out more letters. Even to the NFL, I've called all the NFL teams and stuff, because, you know, we need to get private funding donated and get to, so victims have resources, because there's just there, it's heartbreaking. You don't see that there's just not enough resources out there. You know, like I said, you know, in Spokane, the YWCA was a great resource for us, you know, as far as you know, the kids being able to talk to a counselor and get what happened, you know, it was devastating. So they were a good one up there. Your coalitions against domestic violence, your local ones, good ones, get a hold of them. They have resources. They know lists of them, so you guys can do that too. I don't have a good rapport with the Washington State Coalition in Olympia, so I don't know. I didn't talk to you about that before we came on, but they're the ones that told me that this registry was a bad idea. And they said that the registry would be a bad idea because the victim's name would be known. Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask, why in God's name would a victim's name be known? It wouldn't. It was just their ploy to make this so, you know, they were afraid for victims and putting victims in harm's way. I said, wait a second. So you're telling me, and this is how I presented it to them, but I was the first person that testified. It's on C-SPAN if you guys want to look it up. It's on there, Washington State C-SPAN, January 29th of 2018 is when I testified, or 19 is when I testified. Anyways, their deal was, oh, the victim's name would be known and stuff. And I didn't get a chance to rebuttal that. And I don't know why, and they didn't let me, but that was, we were in a hearing deal, you know. So anyways, and I said, well, wait a second. Afterwards, I said, so you're telling me, and this is how I feel about this, that's why I'm pursuing it the way I'm doing it, is if you're convicted of a sexual crime, you go on a sex offenders registry. So when they put my name, say Joe Blow, on a sex offenders registry, Joe Blow, oh, he raped this girl, or did this? No. So why in hell would they put it on a violent offenders registry or domestic violence registry? The victim's name wouldn't be known. It's just a cop out. Because here's the thing with, and this is my opinion, and I'm going to say it, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but I'm going to say it anyways. See, it's all about dead presidents. And if you guys don't know what that term means, it's all about money. And if you don't are aware of this, you know, coalitions are only as good as the people that work behind them. In Florida, and I don't know if you've got a chance or you read about this yet, Shannon, or not, but maybe you might want to look into this, do some research on the lady that was running the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And this is what happened. She was the head of the domestic violence, Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and she was getting paid astronomical amount, like $1 million a year. Well, she went on, oh, it gets worse. She got stubbed her toe or something, so she went on medical leave. She collected in 5-year period. It's all over national news. She's actually being indicted on it right now. From the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, while shelters are being closed in Florida, she embezzled $17 million of nonprofit taxpayer donation dollars. For 5 years of that she was collecting all this money and embezzling it, she wasn't fully working. Oh, she's not the only one. There was 7 of them involved, or 5 of them involved out there in Florida that are all been indicted on this. The amount that they took from victims and survivors is in the 20s of millions of dollars. How many lives? So I have a sour taste when it comes to coalitions against domestic violence. Don't get me wrong, people. I'm not saying they're bad things. Some of them are great, but be cautious. And we did our research in Washington, and same thing here in Washington, you know, and I've actually have gag orders with me. I'm not allowed to contact them here in Washington because of it. And it's only because, and it's not the local ones. It's just because the state coalition funds the YWCA, your local coalitions against domestic violence and all that stuff, and all the resources that the victims get out here. they determine where the money goes. They collect it from United Way, from Amazon, from Microsoft, and all that stuff to donate all this money. See, that's what Team Tina is trying to do. Is we want to take that money that they're getting donated to them and put it to the victims, and that's what we would like to see done. This code, the way that these embezzling money at victims' expense is wrong. And shelters being closed in Florida, shelters being closed in Wisconsin, shelters being closed in Missouri, shelters being closed in Washington State. This is going on across the nation. Why? Because they say there's no funding. Well, there's obviously funding if they can. These head of these coalitions can embezzle $28 million between 5 of them. There's obviously money. It's just going in the wrong pocket. And again, that brings me back to what I said earlier. Why is it that the victims and survivors are not the people working in these coalitions? Why is it these educated people working there? They shouldn't be the ones working there. It should be victims and survivors. Give a survivor a foot up. Give a survivor something to do. Give a survivor or a victim something to talk about. Now they're a survivor. They got a job. They're teaching they're explaining to other victims and other survivors, and they're educating them about this. That's how you create a safety net, or you how you can help a victim. That's how you can help, because survivors have gone through it. And you know what? A survivor doesn't need to make, or a victim or survivor doesn't need to make $2-3 million a year to run a coalition and close down shelters so they can make more money. They're not going to think that way. I mean, you wouldn't. You would go out there and you would open up a shelter, and you would be, take a minimum wage to do it. And most survivors and victims would, because they understand what I'm talking about. They know how financial destitute they were. They know they don't have an education. They know they don't have job skills. They do have job skills. It's talking to other victims and survivors and making them become survivors. That's what they can do. And that's who we should be putting in these coalition jobs. I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, I think that just like what you do, and you do it, and other people out there do too. I mean, they do because they know they want to help, and they know what hell that these people are going through. And again, it's not just men and women, it's little children too. And that's, I don't know if you probably don't know this story, and I probably shouldn't even tell it to you, but I'm going to, where the father came home and shot his wife, shot his 2 kids. One of them was 2 years old. And then the 8-year-old or 12-year-old tried to run out the front door of the house. And the 9-year-old, because the 12-year-old was another story. The cop shot that guy before he killed her. That was in Oregon. 5 people died there. But the father shot the kid running out the door, put the gun to his head and shot him. So these are little kids, or victims too, you guys. It's heartbreaking. And see, I see these stories and I get updates on these all the time, and it's to see this stuff is, we can do better as a society. You students can do better. You could get out there and Shannon, get a group together, maybe get them on making phone calls. And you know what? The way we get change in this country is by speaking up and doing something about it. We can all sit idle. I could go sit on my couch and watch CNN or Fox News all day long, or I can get on my computer and do something to end this violence that's going on across this country. And I choose to do that. I choose to bring awareness to this because it's something that needs to be addressed. Like I said, I'm 62 years old. I should be traveling the country, seeing the country, instead of doing this. But I'm doing this because I believe in it so much. And if we can get the people involved in this to pick up their phone, blow up Washington, D.C., spend a week after everybody gets in office. And next year, I'll plan this for next year. And I tell people, I do it all the time. When I tell people, okay, we're going to start making phone calls today, and we'll blow up the phones in Olympia. We did it in Olympia. That's how when I first started this, you asked me to tell you how this started. Let me tell you how this started. I didn't know what I was going to do. I did my first post on November 28th, 5 days after Tina died, at the family's request. I could go back and read it, but it was just mumble jumble. I don't even know what I wrote. It was so emotional. I was so emotional at the time. And I was crying and trying to do something to trying to honor a little bit and talk about him and stuff. Anyways, overnight, I had 1,000 friends requests just overnight after I posted the post. I'd never been on Facebook before. Didn't even like Facebook. Still don't like Facebook, to be honest with you. But overnight, I had 1,000 friends requests. I accepted them all, didn't know what it was about. I said, oh, this is crazy. And then by January, I said, I called my representative, and that's when I came up with the sex offender thing. I said, we have a sex offenders registry. Why don't we have a domestic violence registry? So January 9th, I called Brad Clipper's office. He would happen to be in Olympia in a session over there. And I left a message with his staffer. And I said, would you have him give me, I'd like to talk to him about the domestic violence and, what happened to my niece and stuff. And she goes, well, he's really busy. We're in session right now. And so he's really busy. He probably won't get back to you until probably March or April. And I kind of got pissed. And I said, hey, I said, no. I said, are you sitting by a computer? And she said, yeah. I says, look up Tina Stewart Thanksgiving Day murder. And she did. And I says, you give that to Brad. Tell him to read it. And then you let him decide if he wants to meet with me. And she started reading, and we got off the phone, And I mean, I was just a little forceful. Maybe I was. I guess I am. I'm an old Marine. So so about 15, 20 minutes later, Brad calls me. And he goes, what are you doing Saturday? I said, I don't know. What am I doing Saturday? He goes, I says, I'd come to Olympia if that's what you want me to do. He goes, no. Because I'm driving home, and I'd like to have a cup of coffee with you and have a talk with you. And how I explained it to him, then I'll explain it to you and your students too, or whoever happens to watch this. Because we're sitting there at the table, and I'm telling him and his wife, and I said, we have a sex offenders registry. Why don't we have one for domestic violence? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, it's kind of a good idea. And I said, here's the deal, Brad. I says, I'm totally honest with you. I said, right now, this idea is a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket. But you take a drop of water and you drop it into a glass of water, and what happens? It creates a ripple. And what's that ripple do? It creates a wave. And what's that wave do? Creates a tsunami. I'm about to create a tsunami. And that's what I told him. And I said, we've got to do this, because if we don't, how many more people are going to die? I mean, you guys up in Spokane, it's like every day in Spokane, there's another person being murdered, domestic violence up there. It's so crazy up there. It's just like my nephew, the father of the children, of Tina's children. He's had 2 murders right by his house because of domestic violence. And, and him, I mean, I'm not going to lie, he's gone out and he's rescued women in the middle of the night because, obviously they know who he is. And they call him, and he'll get a crew together, and they go get him. They don't even mess around. They just go out and they'll pull a woman out, and they've done it a couple of times. But I don't recommend anybody doing that. I don't like it when he does it. It just creates more problems. And for me, it creates problems because then if he gets in trouble, I got to address it, and I don't want to address it because, we have to address a lot of things. There's always going to be certain things that happen, but we've got to, we just keep moving forward, but we get the students involved, and we get more colleges involved, hopefully, and get them to do the same thing. Get you guys a panel at the SCC. Get a group together. You've got survivors. I know you do. Put a little letter out and say, hey, let's get a support group. Because you know what? I guarantee you this, and I guarantee every one of you out there, if you do this in your school, you're going to find out there's more than 27 or 29, whatever you said there, people out there. Because a lot of women and a lot of men don't talk about sexual abuse. Still abuse. They don't talk about it. They're shameful, and it's wrong. You've got to be able to, you didn't ask for it. You're a victim. You didn't ask to be assaulted. You didn't ask to be sexually assaulted. You didn't ask to be abused verbally. You're a victim. And until they understand that, they're not even going to realize they're a victim. And does that make, I think that makes sense to you. I know it makes sense to you because but I'm saying victims don't realize they're even a victim. And I don't think Tina knew she was a victim until it was too late. She did after the headbutt, because she'd been with Nick for a year before that, and they broke up after he headbutted her on Halloween. And then, like I said, 6 months later, not even, it might have been only 7 or 8 months later, she had only been back together with him for a few months before he killed her. And it's just, we think, I got a text from a girl, and I don't remember who it was. Tina told him she was leaving. So we're going to talk about that. Can I talk about that before we get off of here? Okay. Listen, all you victims, anybody out there, and I'm going to tell you this right now. Do not ever tell your perpetrator that you are leaving them. Do not ever do that. You do that without a plan. Don't ever do that. You make a plan and you leave. You don't tell them you're leaving. Don't give them the opportunity. Don't warn them, because all that does is enrage them. Don't do that. Especially if you've ever been assaulted, or if you, like I said earlier, if he's ever put her, ever put their hands around your neck or a weapon to you, guess what? You will die before you leave that relationship. That's a 95% rate. Seriously, 95% of all victims of homicide victims have told their perpetrator they are leaving. Don't do that. You make a plan, make it safe, and you do it. Maybe if they go to the store to get a pack of cigarettes or go get a 6-pack of beer or go hang out with their buddies, then you leave. Don't tell anybody, maybe your closest friend, but don't you tell anybody, because let me tell you, they have a way of finding out. Just make a plan and make it a safe plan. Because if you don't, and you, just like Tina, see, Tina was taken 18 miles out of town. She was murdered out at Newman Lake, is where she was murdered. She lived on Wellesley in Spokane. He took her all the way out to his dad's house, is where he killed her at. The person that got a hold of me, Tina told Nick she was leaving that night. She wanted to leave him. She was done with all the fight and all the abuse. That came after the trial and after that, and everything was done. Because if we would have known that before the trial, now it becomes a first-degree murder. And we didn't know that till after the trial. So we can't go back and charge him. He's charged with second degree. He pled guilty to second degree because I think he knew that this person knew that Tina had said that she was leaving. That makes it a first degree because now it's premeditated. He took her 18 miles out of town to do that. That's just our opinion. That's what we were told after the case. Doesn't make a difference here nor there. Again, you victims, anybody out there, male, female, if you're in a bad relationship, make a plan, do it safely, and don't tell anybody, because you just don't know who your assailant, perpetrator, whatever you want to call them. You don't know how close they are and how they can manipulate your friends to tell them something that you don't want them to know. And it happens all the time. They're really good at it. And not only that, they're good at it with family members. You need to understand that. You have to understand that, because too often they don't. And they, just like you had that murder on Christmas of Aliana Johnson. Do you remember that one? I'm friends with Celia, her mom, Virginia. She told him she was leaving. She was done. And you read the whole story and you know what happened. It's heartbreaking, to see that he didn't go to that drawer once. He didn't go to that drawer twice. He went to that drawer 3 times. He got that gun out. The 3rd time he killed her. It's a heartbreaking story. And it's all because she told him she was done. There was another one in Spokane. The kid beat his girlfriend with a Dodd, is her name. Beat her with a tow hitch off of his truck. The same thing, And that was she was going to leave him, and he went out and got the tow hitch off the truck and came in and beat her to death with it. So again, guys, make a plan, because most all homicides of domestic violence are when you're trying to leave a victim. And it usually happens within the first 30 days. Just so you know. And again, like I was telling you earlier, do your research. You don't have to take my word for this. I don't care. I'm not trying to make myself be some guru and some person high on a pedestal. That's not me. I want people to be aware of something. Do your own research. I don't talk stuff that's not facts, because it has to be fact to me. Just like for me to put a name on a registry, I have people contacting me all over the country, say, hey, will you add this guy to the registry or this girl to the registry? Send me conviction papers. Send me legal documents from a court saying they were convicted. That is the only way that's going to happen. That's why I go to the courts to get this information. I'm not going to falsely accuse anybody. I'm not putting names out there for this, but I am going to put them out there if they're doing this, you know. In most of these cases, you know, like I said about protection orders, there are protection orders in domestic violence homicides. These piece of papers right here, this protection order thing, it doesn't stop a bullet. It doesn't stop a knife. It doesn't stop them from running you over with their car. Oh yeah, you guys just had a girl up there in Spokane just hit her boyfriend with her car. She tried to kill him. That just happened in Spokane too, the other day, as a matter of fact. So it doesn't stop them from doing this. A protection order is only is good for law enforcement. I know it gives people a sense of security. Oh, well, I got this protection order. No, be diligent. Be mindful of what your surroundings are. They will hide in the darkness, in the shadows. They will pop out when you least expect them. And then you're a random homicide. Be careful, especially in the first 30 to 90 days after you get that protection order. They will violate it, and they will violate it again. And that's why, I guess, you know, that's why in my sense with doing this registry, I'm going to put those guys on there, especially if they've got a pattern of violating a protection order. Because you know what? If they're doing that, who knows what they're capable of, you know, and it's sad, but we're doing the best we can. I mean, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I hope that I can reach some people out there. And I hope that I encourage you guys and look up these stories that I've talked about. Ilana Johnson, you guys will see what I'm talking about. It's in the news up there. You can Google Tina Stewart's Thanksgiving Day murder. You're going to find about 3 pages of Google stories because we've been all over the airwaves and everywhere on national news and everything. So, you know, but the main story was up there in Spokane. Matter of fact, after we get done here, I'm calling Q6 News, Channel 2 News, Channel 4 News, not about this. Well, I'll tell them about this, but I'm going on there to talk to them about the registry and stuff, because letting them know where we're at with it, because, you know, I haven't done that recently, an updated news broadcast, but I need to do that. And I'll reach out to mine. We've got so many news broadcasters across the country in different states and stuff, though, that are starting to see that, hey, we're serious about this and we want to bring awareness to this. And, you know, what I'm hoping for by doing a registry is maybe just maybe, we'll know, first off, we'll know who these violent perpetrators are, but maybe people will think before they do it, because, hey, they're going to say, hey, I'm going to be on that registry if I do this. And I know it's a slim chance, but even if it's one life that it saves, hey, I'm going to do it. You know, it's kind of like when you're in recovery of a drug addiction. If you can reach one person's life, you save that one life, then it was all worth it, wasn't it? Because you reached out and you, just like what you do, Shannon, if you save one person's life, doesn't that just make you feel like, God, I accomplished this? At least I know they're not dead. See, and with me, with Tina's story, I'm not the one saving people's lives. It's her story saving their lives. I'm just being the voice and the mouthpiece. You know what I mean? I'm just the mouthpiece. I'm not telling these facts because it's my stuff. I'm just the mouthpiece, spreading the facts and stuff. Because this isn't about it. Like I said, it's not about me. And this isn't about Tina. I mean, Tina Stewart just is the one that sparked this wave, and, you know, it did. It's about all victims. It's about Ilana Johnson. It's about Dodd, the girl, not Trishelle, her sister. I don't want to get the wrong name, but anyway, her last name's Dodd up there. And it's about them. It's about Jamie Bradshaw. It's about Jessica Munson. You know, these are girls that have all been murdered up there in Spokane just in the last couple of years, you know. I've got people, Brianna McQuitty in Kansas. This is about her. It's about all victims of domestic violence. It's about the 2-year-old in Houston, or in Texas, you know, that it wasn't in Houston. It was outside of Houston. But anyway, father comes home and kills his wife and decides he's going to kill all 3 of his kids. Youngest one was 2 months old, and he took a hammer to the the two older ones and took a Phillips screwdriver and stabbed the 2-month-old baby with a Phillips screwdriver. They just said massive time. They didn't even report. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. But we can do better. And I've been wanting to get this into the schools, so getting some colleges involved in this, because I think that they all need to understand, and they come from high school. And I know a lot of girls out there in this college. If 1 in 7 in high school are reporting this, then that they're going on to college. So there's still 1 in 7 college girls, but it's probably a lot worse than what we see, because they're not coming forward until they come to realize what it is. And the website, I was trying to see the website. Oh, it is from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So it's a national, and what the headline says, I don't know, can you see that? It says learn more. And that's, you click on that and read about it, because
And we'll be featuring throughout the rest of the week, Don. We'll be featuring different social media posts from not only Team Tina, but from YWCA Spokane, and Against Women International, and the Violence Spokane Coalition, as well as the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So yeah, certainly we're going to be sharing a lot of those resources throughout this week and throughout the rest of the month.
This one here, the learn more, I mean, it really explains to somebody that wouldn't know that they're a victim. I guess that I hope that makes sense, because a lot of victims don't even realize they are, and so it's until it's too late. Now the assault started, and then by the end they just feel like they're trapped in a relationship. There's no way out, and they feel like they got to stay, and and they can save them, and maybe it was them, and then they get that guilt feeling that it was probably their fault. I mean, the whole routine, what I'm talking about there. And that's the sad part, is they don't realize it until it's too late, and now they're in this relationship that they can't seem to find a way out of. And people always say, well, why didn't you leave? Oh my God, I hate that question. I always say the same thing. That's the stupidest damn question anybody can ever ask a victim. Why did you leave? And how come, why? Because I just explained to you why. They done isolated you, took everything away from you had. And most of the time they take away what you are as a person, because they strip you of everything. I tell it like this. And I think I know we're running short on time, so I'll get this done. I tell it like this. I'm a Marine, okay? In Marine Corps, in the boot camp, you go to boot camp. They break you down from, I was a hippie, long hair, smoking weed all day, drinking all the time back in the early 70s and stuff when I went in the Marine Corps. Well, I had a rude awakening, because I wasn't that hippie guy when I came out of the Marine Corps. Boy, they made me into some mean fighting machine. They stripped me of everything. Well, that's what a perpetrator does to a victim. They strip you down to take all of your emotions, your physical, your mental, your stability, everything away from you. And then they build you back up to what they want you to be: loving, caring, punching bag of a wife or a spouse or whatever. And it's wrong. They manipulate you, and it's heartbreaking, but that's what happens. And victims don't really realize it until it's too late, and they're stuck, and there's just no way out. And then the families are against them. And like I said, it's heartbreaking. And as a community, we just gotta just keep moving forward. And we gotta, like I said, and I stress this to all the time, is, like I said, education, education, education. I believe that. We've got to start in our grade schools, our middle schools, and our high schools. When we have middle school students coming to school and killing their girlfriend or killing their boyfriend with a gun, then that tells you it's getting worse, and it's working its way down. And like I said, I told you about the kid in the 5th grade. Come on, really? And we've got to do better, and we have to. And I know with all this coronavirus and all this crap going on, it kind of took the wind out of ourselves for a minute, because of all this. But thank God, our prosecutors' offices are opening up again, and our records departments, and they've all been reaching out to me. And like I said, you kind of came on when I was on the phone with one of the prosecutors, what I do every day. And, and that's okay. I mean, and the prosecutors are going to get on board with this idea, because they know it's a good idea. So the next step is get Olympia to see it's a good idea, and then get this spread across the country. And we're working on it, and we're going to get it done. I'll get it done. I'm a feisty old guy, and I'm a Marine. I just don't give up. The battle's not over yet.
Well, Don, I just want to say, as an educator, as an advocate, as a community member, and certainly as a survivor, I greatly, and I know we greatly appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with our campus community. And I hope that this does touch and this does impact survivors and victims out there in understanding the resources and understanding the history behind it. And that Tina's story continues to inspire and continues to move this wave of action, of taking a stand and taking action against domestic violence and other forms of relationship violence. Again, I know I put this link in the chat, but we'll highlight www.teamtina.org. Great resource, great opportunity to learn more about the mission and vision and efforts of your organization. And we certainly appreciate you being on today.
Make sure you put up the national coalition or the national hotline numbers up there too. I know you will. I know you will. And the local deals. And like I said, I like to say reach out to some church resources and stuff, but sometimes, I'm going to be honest. I've talked to some church members and stuff, and they've told me the same thing. They said, Don, we'd love you to come and talk to the church because there's there's domestic violence in the churches too. And it's unfortunate, and I've actually, it was the Mormon church asked me to come and talk to their commissioners, whatever you call it. And I said, and during the coronavirus, everything kind of stopped everything. But that was one of my things, is to go talk to churches, reach out to churches for resources. I mean, if you really need resources, but, make sure you always reach out to your family. Even though that you've been isolated from them, doesn't mean they don't care. So that should be your number one call. And, after you get out of the relationship, don't tell anybody. Safety, safety, safety first. If you were leaving him, and I know this is hard in college. I know it's hard in college because you're in dorms, you're in colleges, and you can't really just pack up and leave college. But you really think about your relationship. Is your life worth staying at the college? If you're being stalked or you're being harassed or you're being abused, it's maybe you need to move away from the college or something. I don't know. That's a tough one when it comes to things like that, because what are students supposed to do? So more, if we can get a student coalition together, you know what I'm saying? And I know you do. Get a coalition of survivors. And I'm sure, like I said, you've got a lot more out there than you think you do on your campus. And you get those people, men and women, and maybe a men's group and a women's group, and maybe even have a joint group and stuff, and have discussion about it. And to me, I mean, when I go talk to people at rallies and stuff, that's why I try to tell people, you've got to have that discussion. You've got to do that. But if we can get groups like that together, especially on college campuses where you can have, I mean, heck, when I was a kid and I was in college, they had chess club. My God, we can't have one for domestic violence. We can have a discussion about abuse and stuff. Yeah, you can. So we should do that. I mean, you guys maybe look into it, see what you can do there. And this should be all across all colleges. It really should be, because it's a lot worse on them campuses than people think. I guarantee that. I mean, you know it and I know it, and I'm sure that a lot of victims out there that are being victimized on college campuses, they just don't realize it yet that they're a victim, and they will. Read this, learn more about domestic violence, Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Look it up. The CDC has the same thing on there. Okay. Shannon, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you letting me do this, and I hope that some information I got. I know sometimes I go on about different things, but it's to bring light to this whole thing, because until you guys really realize, and I don't think people really realize how bad it is out there, but if you just put it into perspective of every 3 seconds, somebody is being abused to domestic violence in the United States of America. And I'm sure that's worse. Every 24 hours, every single day in the United States of America, 7 women are losing their lives to domestic violence. That's not children. That's not men. That's just women. So you start taking those numbers and you start adding those up. You start thinking about it. And, every 3 seconds, my God, think about 60 seconds in a minute. Do the math. Do the math. Yeah. Yeah. It just in some cases, a lot of cases, the victims get out and they get help. Tina's case, it didn't happen. And we can only do what we do right now, keeping her memory alive. But more importantly, like I said, it's not about just keeping her memory alive. It's about saving lives. And her mom, her mom tells me, she did a post. She goes, Don, she goes, you're just not going to give up, are you? And I said, nope. And she goes, you know what? Tina's probably dancing up there in heaven doing the jig, because Tina was a crazy girl. She couldn't drive her shit though. I mean, I could tell you, I should have told you some funny stories about her. She was just a lousy driver, but she would bring home critters all over the place. Just to bring a little bit of light to her, when she was 12 years old, she used to go down to the bridge down there at Hamilton, with a homeless place down there where all the homeless people hang out. And she lived down there on the west side there. And she would make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Her mom would buy her local bread and a jar of peanut butter. She would come home and make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to take to the homeless people under the bridge, because they didn't have food. She would go feed them. When she was murdered, up until the last day she worked was the day before she was murdered. She left Jack in the Box, where she worked up there on North Foothills, and she drove down to the homeless, and she took all the leftover French fries and all the hamburgers or whatever was left. She kept the bag together, and she, all the way up till she died, she still did that. Isn't that just crazy? She still went down and fed the homeless people, because she always said, they're less fortunate than me. Even though when she struggled to feed her, to put groceries on her own table sometimes, she still did it. It was just like, yeah. People used to say she was super mom, because people always thought she could walk into a room with kids. Here at my house, we had 63 people here one year. 24 of those were kids. My house was all tore up. Tina walks in, 10 minutes later, it's quieter than heck in my house. I'm going, what the hell? Where'd all the kids go? I figured they all went down to the park or something. We go in my living room, we got all tables. She's got them all sitting down in there reading books and coloring and stuff. How the heck did you just do that? She just laughs. She goes, because I'm a big kid. I'm just like they are. And it was just, it always reminded me how special she was, and she was with kids. And that was her dream, to be to own her own daycare and have her own daycare, to be with kids all the time. But she was just a big kid. It's always puts a smile on my face when I think of that story of Thanksgiving, because there was so many of us here, and she walked in, everybody was shocked she was able to do that though. But anyways, we'll leave it on that note.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that story of light and heart. Yeah. That just highlights again the drive behind your mission. And
yeah, it ain't over yet. We'll get there though. We're good.